It is time for the strongest SMG. Hoo-yah! Right, very much in the same vein as what I did with the assault rifles. I'm just going to be going over their DPS and whether or not you can get along with their talent or not, or whether it works with your build. I will leave entirely up to you. I'm just going to be calculating what one effectively does the most DPS. And from there, make your mind up. Now, as an added twist on this one, I'm going to be adding in Oxpecker as we saw it in the PTF. Now, for these calculations, I will be running 4-piece Hunter's Fury, Cheska, Grupo as like the base of the calculations. However, these are not the ideal setups for these weapons. Both Chatterbox and Lady Death will get better usage out of Zuia and Grupo. Backfire will obviously get better usage out of 2 Cheska for the Hasbro, and then Grupo Sokolov or 2 Sokolov would be better for Ouroboros and Oxpecker, increasing their base damage. Essentially, on a SMG build, you don't realistically need that Cheska piece. It is actually less damage. Going Grupo here for more crit damage is more beneficial, especially on the exotic SMGs, simply just because they have 21% critical hit chance as a roll, and most of them will have a 15% crit chance as an attachment. And I think 2 of them have a 10% crit chance as an attachment. Yeah, you just don't get a lot of usage out of something like Cheska, so you don't necessarily need it. Putting a more utility piece there is generally better. Just for example, 3 of the builds that I'm going to be showing are at 66% crit chance, so you're wasting 6%, which is, I won't say it's the biggest deal, but it is a waste. And 2 of them are at 61, which isn't that bad. You are still wasting a 1% crit chance when you could literally swap things around, get a little bit more utility involved. They do more than enough DPS anyway, so missing out on like 2 crit chance isn't the worst thing in the world. So, on to the actual builds. Up first, we have Backfire. Now, I don't actually really know why I'm showing these, because they are all at 60% crit chance. The builds stay the same. None of the mods move. I'm using Obliterate and Unstoppable Force for all of them. The only things that really actually change is the crit damage. And for Backfire, it's 181, not including the talent. We're not building for Hasbro, so that's going to be a problem. For Lady Death, it's 176. For Ouroboros, it's 176. For Chatterbox, it's 181 again. And then finally for Oxpecker, which I've had to show as an MP7 on the sheet thing, is 166, just because it doesn't actually have a critical hit damage mod. It's got a headshot damage mod, but it also comes with a nice chunk of optimal range. So yeah, read into that what you will. So now for the math, and again, there's a lot going on, so I've put them into 2 separate parts. We've got Backfire, Lady Death, Ouroboros, Chatterbox, and then Oxpecker, all at 60% crit chance. They're all accounting for Hunter's Fury, which is that 0.5315. They've got the plus 15% weapon damage. Hopefully you can see that weapon is 0.3. Obliterate and Unstoppable Force are at max. The only thing we haven't calculated in are the talents. And this is their DPS. They're all being compared to Backfire, which is the benchmark. Lady Death is falling behind by 26.42%. Ouroboros is doing 22.39% more. Chatterbox is falling behind by 23.73%. And Oxpecker is down by 14.92%. Obviously, we then have to check the sustained DPS, and as you can see here, again, all being compared to Backfire. I don't even know what's happened to Lady Death. It doesn't get much better, I won't lie. Ouroboros taking the lead in terms of sustained. Chatterbox isn't doing too bad, and surprisingly, Oxpecker is doing better in its sustained DPS than it is with its burst DPS, which is quite surprising considering everyone complained about the reload and the mag size. But yeah. Right, now it's time to activate the talents, and again, bunch of caveats. For example, we're not running Hasbro on Backfire, so you might be able to hit this sort of DPS, but once. This is all of the math. You can see that Backfire's got like 381% critical hit damage. Lady Death has now got 75% amp. Blah, 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 blah. this is the DPS. Lady Death can't keep up with Backfire. Ouroboros has very severely dropped, but it does actually still end up being the most consistent SMG. Chatterbox is doing silly stuff, and Oxpecker vanishes into the ether. And when we look at the sustained DPS, the main one to actually note is Chatterbox. The reload I've put to 0 because I'm assuming you're getting enough kills quick enough to refill the magazine, or 50% of the magazine, which is doable. I do it a few points throughout this entire video. I am using Chatterbox. However, there is one thing to note. I didn't just run around with Chatterbox when looking at all of these builds, although Chatterbox was probably the more comfortable one to be using in this style. Well, minus obviously Ouroboros, but I feel like Ouroboros videos are a dime a dozen on YouTube at the moment. So the next thing I did is, while playing around, I tried to average out the overall capability of what I had with those talents. For example, at no point did I ever get the full 5 stacks on Chatterbox. I ran around for 2 hours with Chatterbox, and at no point did I get it. The most I got was 4 stacks. So we're now going to go back through the DPS calculations, and I'm going to put in what I found to be sort of like my normal with their talents and just see how they line up. This is just for fun. Most of probably the credible information that you would want is already done. So thank you very much for sticking around. But if you want to just laugh at how bad I am at using SMGs, keep watching. So up first is my time running around in the open world with Backfire without Hasbro. I found that I only really averaged around 100, 120 stacks. I've put 100 in here, and the reason for this is either I died to the bleed or the event was over and I just couldn't build stacks anymore, and then the timer ran out. Lady Death I've put to an amp of 0.34. For burst DPS, this is inaccurate. It should still be 0.75. If you want, when it comes to the actual where it shows the DPS, this would basically put it on evens with what Backfire is. It's like 0.3% more than what Backfire was doing. The reason I've done it this way is simply just because when running from one event to another, I'd have enough time to build up the full stacks on Lady Death, but while doing the event and then firing and consuming the stacks and moving around and trying to survive and do other things, the most I was really ever able to get was like 17 stacks. And in that scenario, all Lady Death has is sustained DPS, which is where Lady Death absolutely sucks. So I've put the amp of 0.34 in to account for like 17 stacks. Will only really be shown when I show the sustained DPS. Obviously, Ouroboros doesn't have a damage talent, and when it comes to Chatterbox, the talent affects RPM, which is on the next sheet. And obviously, I don't have Oxpecker in the live game; it's not out yet, so can't really run around with that one. But again, it doesn't really have a damage talent, so we can't test it anyway. So again, in terms of burst DPS, Lady Death should basically be where Backfire is. Ouroboros, again, doesn't have a damage talent, but it's keeping up. Chatterbox, as you can see, the RPM is 1,700, so it has decreased a little bit, and Oxpecker doesn't have a damage talent, nor is it in the game. And then this is the sustained DPS calculations for those. To put it simply, in terms of overall DPS, Chatterbox is winning. In terms of stability, like no messing around with the weapon, Ouroboros. If you're a crazy person and just want maximum Ungas with big numbers, Backfire, which basically leaves Lady Death and Oxpecker. Oxpecker is going to be more designed towards survivability. In truth, it's probably just me, but I just cannot get along with Lady Death. It doesn't make sense. Its mechanic is really, really, really bad. It's hard to sustain the mechanic within longer drawn out fights, and the moment you're unable to utilize the talent, the mechanic on the talent, it basically just vanishes. It becomes a dead weapon. So I will leave you to decide what the best SMG is. However, for me personally, I can say with 100% certainty that Lady Death at the moment is the worst. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. Have fun. Good luck. Don't die. It's bad for the health.